Disqualified police dog is about to be put down. Then a mechanic in the crowd says his name. The acrid smell of synthetic drugs filled the air at Atlanta's canine training center, but Max wasn't paying attention. Sarah Collins watched in disbelief as her Belgian Malinois partner of 6 years wandered aimlessly around the training field, his usual laser-focused demeanor replaced by what appeared to be confusion. The morning sun cast long shadows across the testing area, where 5 identical metal containers stood in a perfect line, only one containing the narcotic sample. "Final attempt, Agent Collins." Captain Reynolds's voice carried a weight that made Sarah's stomach clench. She recognized that tone. It was the same one he'd used before forcibly retiring 3 other dogs in the past year. Sarah knelt beside Max, her hand finding the spot behind his ear that usually helped him focus. "Come on, buddy," she whispered, her voice steady despite the fear building in her chest. "Show them what you can do." Max's ears twitched at her voice, but his usual sharp response was missing. He moved forward, his nose working the air, but his movements lacked their characteristic precision. Sarah felt her heart rate spike as he passed the correct container without so much as a pause. When he finally sat, indicating he'd found something, he was 3 containers away from the target. Wrong. Again. The small crowd of K9 officers watching the certification test shifted uncomfortably. They all knew what a failed detection test meant, especially for a dog with Max's seniority. Sarah caught sympathetic glances from her colleagues, but she couldn't focus on them. Her world had narrowed to the sight of Captain Reynolds making a final, decisive mark on his clipboard. "I'm sorry, Sarah." Reynolds lowered his voice as he approached, though not enough to prevent the others from hearing. "Max has failed the certification. You know Protocol 22K for disqualified dogs." The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. Protocol 22K was absolute. Police dogs that lost their detection abilities had to be euthanized. No exceptions, no retirement options. The rule had been established after a retired police dog had been used by criminals to identify drug concealment techniques. The department couldn't risk their highly trained animals falling into the wrong hands. There has to be a mistake. Sarah fought to keep her voice professional, though her hands had curled into fists at her sides. "Max has the best record in the unit. Just last month, he found that explosives cache at the airport when every other dog missed it. Rules exist for a reason, Agent Collins." Reynolds tucked his clipboard under his arm, his expression carefully neutral. "You have 48 hours to—" "Hold up!" a voice called from the crowd, interrupting Reynolds mid-sentence. A man in oil-stained coveralls pushed through the group of officers, nearly tripping in his haste to reach them. His name patch identified him as Marcus, and dark grease stains covered his uniform. "I'm Marcus Ramirez, unit mechanic," he said, breathing heavily as if he'd run across the compound. "I think I know what's wrong with Max." Reynolds' face darkened. "This is a closed certification test, Mr. Ramirez. You're not authorized to be here." But Marcus stood his ground, his eyes fixed on Max. 2 weeks ago, during routine maintenance, there was an incident. A patrol car's muffler backfired. Loudest damn thing I've ever heard. Max was right next to it when it happened. Sarah's mind raced back through the past 2 weeks. She'd been on mandatory leave after their last major bust, catching up on paperwork. Max had stayed at the kennel, maintaining his training routine. "Why wasn't I informed about this?" she demanded, looking between Marcus and Reynolds. "It didn't seem serious at the time," Marcus continued, wiping his hands nervously on his coveralls. "But I served in artillery in the army. I've seen what that kind of acoustic trauma can do. Temporary hearing loss doesn't just affect hearing, it can throw off a dog's entire sensory system, including their ability to precisely locate scents." Reynolds stepped forward, his authority bristling. "This is speculation, Mr. Ramirez. The test results are clear." "Actually, sir," a new voice joined the conversation. Dr. Maria Chen, the unit's veterinarian, walked up with her tablet in hand. "What Mr. Ramirez is suggesting is entirely possible. Temporary hearing loss can significantly impact a dog's ability to triangulate odors, even if their olfactory sense remains intact. Sarah watched Max as the discussion continued. He was sitting calmly now, his eyes fixed on her with that unwavering trust that had saved her life more times than she could count. 6 years of partnership flashed through her mind. Max finding a lost child in Stone Mountain Park, detecting a bomb in a crowded shopping mall, taking down an armed suspect before he could pull the trigger. "I want a full veterinary examination," Sarah stated, her voice leaving no room for argument. Protocol 22K allows for medical exceptions if there's a documented temporary condition. Reynolds' jaw tightened, a vein pulsing in his neck. "You have 24 hours to prove this theory, Agent Collins. After that, the protocol stands." As the crowd began to disperse, Marcus lingered behind. "There's something else you should know," he said quietly, glancing around to ensure they wouldn't be overheard. "Max isn't the first dog to suddenly lose his certification after maintenance work in my garage." Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the morning air. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying maybe you should look into why 3 other dogs were retired after similar accidents in the past year." Marcus pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket. "And maybe you should check who signed off on those maintenance reports." As Marcus walked away, Sarah unfolded the paper to find a list of dates and incident numbers. At the bottom of each report was a familiar signature, Captain James Reynolds. Max pressed against her leg, his warm presence grounding her as it had countless times before. Sarah ran her fingers through his fur, feeling the strong muscles beneath, ready for action despite everything that had happened. "Don't worry, partner," she whispered, her mind already racing through possibilities. "We're not done yet, not by a long shot." The morning sun had risen fully now, casting harsh light across the training field. In its glare, the metal containers gleamed like ammunition shells, and Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that she'd just stumbled onto something much bigger than a failed certification test. She pulled out her phone and dialed Dr. Chen's number, ready to fight for her partner's life, and maybe uncover why someone wanted Atlanta's best detection dog out of commission. The security footage flickered on Marcus's laptop screen, casting a blue glow across the dimly lit garage. Sarah leaned forward, her eyes fixed on the timestamp, 2:14 a.m., 2 weeks ago. Max lay at her feet, his head resting on his paws, but his eyes alert, watching the shadows dancing across the walls of the empty maintenance bay. "There," Marcus pointed to the screen. "Watch the far corner." A figure in a police uniform, Captain Reynolds, appeared in the frame, followed by a man in an expensive suit. The stranger's face remained hidden from the camera as he handed Reynolds what looked like a manila envelope. 3 minutes later, Marcus fast-forwarded, the patrol car's muffler mysteriously malfunctions, right next to where Max was kennelled for the night. Sarah's jaw tightened. Could be a coincidence. Like these were coincidences? Marcus pulled up a spreadsheet. Last 18 months, 5 canines retired after accidents in this garage, all specialized in detecting synthetic drugs, all handled by Reynolds himself. The air in the garage felt heavier suddenly. Sarah remembered each dog. Kaiser, Luna, Rex, Bella, and now Max was next in line. All top performers, all suddenly losing their edge after maintenance incidents. Look at their service records. Marcus clicked through files he shouldn't have access to. Every one of them was involved in major drug busts before their accidents, especially this one. He highlighted a case from 2023, the Atlanta Harbor raid. All 5 dogs were there. Sarah remembered that day, the largest synthetic drug bust in Georgia's history. They'd found a new type of designer drug, something the lab guys said they'd never seen before. The case had been closed after the primary suspect, Dr. James Chen, was found dead in his cell, an apparent suicide. "Pull up Chen's case file," Sarah said, a memory tugging at her mind. The image loaded, and Sarah's breath caught. In the crime scene photo, partially visible behind the police tape, stood the same well-dressed man from the security footage. Max suddenly lifted his head, a low growl rumbling in his chest. Sarah reached for her weapon, but Marcus grabbed her arm. "Security patrol," he whispered. "They can't know we're looking at these files." They killed the laptop's screen just as flashlight beams swept past the garage windows. Sarah held her breath, counting the seconds until the lights moved on. Beside her, Max remained tensed, his body pressed against her leg. When the patrol passed, Marcus reopened the laptop. "There's more. Look at the bank records." A series of transfers appeared on screen, large deposits to an offshore account, then smaller amounts filtered back to a local bank. The recipient's name made Sarah's blood run cold. James Reynolds. "How did you get these?" she asked. Marcus's expression darkened. "Let's just say I'm not just a mechanic. Before Atlanta PD, I worked cybersecurity for the FBI. Started looking into things after the third dog retired. Something felt wrong." Sarah ran her fingers through Max's fur, feeling his solid presence beside her. Reynolds pushed for this certification test. Max wasn't due for evaluation for another 3 months. "They're getting nervous," Marcus said, clicking through more files. "Look at these shipping manifests. Same company that owned the harbor warehouse is back in business. New management, same address." A notification popped up on the screen. Someone accessing police files about the 2023 raid. "They're searching the database right now," Marcus muttered, typing frantically. "Looking for—" The garage lights suddenly blazed on. Sarah and Marcus froze as footsteps echoed outside. "Hide," Sarah whispered, drawing her weapon. Max took position beside her, his injured hearing forgotten in the face of threat. Marcus shoved the laptop into a tool cabinet and slid underneath a patrol car just as the side door opened. Captain Reynolds stepped in, his phone to his ear. "It's handled," he was saying. "The dog fails tomorrow's retest, gets put down by the weekend. No one's going to—" He stopped, seeing Sarah. For a long moment, no one moved. Reynolds' hand drifted toward his hip. "Evening, Captain," Sarah said calmly, though her heart hammered in her chest. "Bit late for an inspection, isn't it?" "Agent Collins." Reynolds' voice was ice. "I could ask you the same thing." Max's growl was barely audible, but his muscles were coiled, ready. Sarah knew he could take Reynolds down in seconds, even with compromised hearing. But that wasn't the play. Not yet. "Just checking Max's kennel," she said. "Thought I heard something." "You know how protective we handlers get." Reynolds' eyes scanned the garage. "Where's your maintenance friend, Ramirez? Haven't seen him since the test." The lie came easily. "Why?" "No reason." Reynolds smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Just remember, Agent Collins, sometimes letting go is the kindest thing we can do, even for our closest partners." The threat wasn't subtle. Sarah matched his smile with one of her own. "I never was good at letting go, sir." After Reynolds left, Sarah waited 5 full minutes before signaling Marcus. He emerged from under the car, his face pale. "We need to move fast," he said, retrieving his laptop. "They're going to—" A crash from outside cut him off. Sarah rushed to the window in time to see 3 men in black tactical gear entering the canine kennel building. "They're not waiting for the retest," she realized, horror dawning. "They're taking care of it now." Marcus was already moving. "There's a back exit through the supply room. I can trigger the fire alarm, buy us some time." "No," Sarah said, checking her weapon. "We're not running." She looked down at Max, saw the same determination in his eyes that she felt. "We're ending this. Tonight." Max's tail wagged once, a soldier acknowledging orders. Injured or not, he was ready for battle. Sarah touched her radio, knowing she'd have one chance to call this in before all hell broke loose. "Dispatch, this is Collins. We have unauthorized entry at K9 Kennel Building, requesting immediate backup. Officer in distress." She clicked off before dispatch could respond, not wanting to give away their position. In the distance, sirens began to wail. "Hope you remember your FBI training," she told Marcus, "because this is about to get complicated." The night air carried the sound of breaking glass from the kennel building. Sarah checked her watch. 3 minutes until backup would arrive. Time to find out just how deep this conspiracy went, and make sure no more dogs disappeared from Atlanta PD's K9 unit. Max pressed against her leg, ready to move. Whatever came next, they would face it together, just like always. Sarah pressed herself against the cold brick wall of the kennel building, Max's warm breath against her leg, the only comfort in the darkness. The tactical team was inside, their shadows moving past frosted windows. Her radio crackled with approaching backup, but they were still 4 minutes out. "We need those files," Marcus whispered from behind her, his laptop clutched to his chest. "Evidence lockers in the administration wing, if Reynolds hasn't destroyed them yet." A memory flashed through Sarah's mind. Max as a puppy, trembling in the corner of a laboratory cage, the day that changed both their lives forever. "There's another way," she said. "Max, remember the doctor?" The Belgian Malinois' ears perked up at the familiar command. 6 years ago, during the raid that brought them together, Sarah had discovered Max in an illegal testing facility, the same facility where Dr. James Chen had been developing his designer drugs. "What are you thinking?" Marcus asked. "Chen's death was too convenient." Sarah checked her weapon. "And that man in the suit from your security footage? He was Chen's research partner, Dr. William Morrison." Max's low growl confirmed the name. He remembered too. Sarah's mind raced back to that day in 2018. She'd been a rookie handler, Max her first canine partner. The call had come in as a routine inspection of a pharmaceutical research facility. But Max, just a year old and newly certified, had gone berserk at the loading dock. "They were using puppies to test detection methods," Sarah explained, the old anger rising in her throat. "Training them with different masking agents, seeing what worked. Most of the dogs didn't survive the experiments, but Max," she scratched behind his ears, feeling the small scar hidden there. "Max was special. He could detect everything they threw at him." Marcus's eyes widened. "That's why they want him gone. He knows their old formulas. And their new ones." Sarah pulled out her phone, bringing up an old case photo. "Look at the equipment in Chen's lab. Now look at the shipping manifest you found. Same specialized machinery, same import company." Morrison's starting up again," Marcus realized, "using Chen's research." A crash from inside the kennel made them both jump. Max's muscles tensed, ready for action. "There's more," Sarah continued, her voice barely a whisper. 2 months before Chen's suicide, Max and I were called to inspect a private plane at the airport. Max alerted on a briefcase. Diplomatic credentials. Couldn't touch it. The owner was Morrison. "Let me guess," Marcus said. "Reynolds was the supervising officer." Sarah nodded. "Ordered us to stand down. Said it would cause an international incident. That night, I went back through Max's training records. Found something interesting." She pulled a folded paper from her vest pocket. Log entries, showing Max had been part of Chen's program before police training, but the dates were wrong. Wrong how? They showed him in the program for 3 years. But when we found him, our vet estimated he was barely a year old. Sarah's hand tightened on her weapon. Someone falsified his records, someone trying to hide where he really came from. Max suddenly stiffened, his head turning toward the building's rear entrance. Sarah held up her hand, signaling Marcus to be quiet. Footsteps approached, multiple sets, trying to move quietly. "Morrison's original research," Sarah whispered, "focused on creating drugs that could evade detection. But his real breakthrough was something else. Something in Max's blood." The footsteps grew closer. 3 men, based on the shadow patterns under the door. "Some of the test puppies developed enhanced detection abilities," Sarah continued. "Side effects of the experiments. Max was the only survivor, but his capabilities went beyond normal canine standards. He could detect substances that didn't even have scent markers." "Jesus," Marcus breathed. "They're not just trying to retire him. They need him back, to study him." The door handle turned slowly. Sarah raised her weapon. "That's why Chen's research partner is back," she said. "Morrison needs Max to perfect his formula, and Reynolds—" The door burst open. 3 men in tactical gear rushed out, weapons raised. But Max was faster. Even with his injured hearing, years of training took over. He launched himself at the nearest attacker, a black blur of focused aggression. Sarah dropped the second man with a precise shot to the shoulder. The third raised his weapon, but Marcus tackled him from behind, years of FBI training evident in his takedown. "Sarah!" Marcus called out, securing the suspect. "Reynolds' office, now!" They ran through the building's dark corridors, Max taking point despite his impairment. The sound of approaching sirens grew louder. Reynolds' office door was ajar, light spilling into the hallway. Inside, the captain was feeding documents into a shredder, his movements frantic. "Step away from the desk," Sarah ordered, weapon trained on her superior officer. Reynolds froze, then slowly turned. His face showed no surprise, only cold calculation. "You don't understand what you're involved in, Collins." "I understand plenty," Sarah replied, "including why you pushed so hard to euthanize Max. Can't have him identifying Morrison's new product, right?" "Morrison," Reynolds laughed. "You think this is about one researcher? This goes higher than you can imagine. International connections, government contracts. Do you know what a dog like Max is worth to certain agencies?" Max growled, the sound echoing in the small office. Reynolds' hand twitched toward his desk drawer. "Don't," Sarah warned. "Max may have injured hearing, but he can still take you down before you touch that gun." "His hearing isn't injured," Reynolds said quietly. "We faked the maintenance accident. Drugged his food that morning. Had to make the certification failure look legitimate." The implications hit Sarah like a physical blow. They hadn't just tried to force Max's retirement, they'd actively sabotaged him. Boots thundered in the hallway. "Atlanta PD, room clear!" Sarah kept her weapon trained on Reynolds as tactical officers swarmed the office. Among them was Lieutenant Martinez from Internal Affairs, the one person she'd texted their location to. "Captain Reynolds," Martinez announced, "you're under arrest for conspiracy, corruption, and attempted destruction of evidence." As they led Reynolds away, Sarah knelt beside Max, checking him for any signs of drugging. His eyes were clear, alert. He'd metabolized whatever they'd given him. "I'm sorry, buddy," she whispered. "I should have known something was wrong sooner." Max's response was to lick her face once, then turn toward the desk where Reynolds had been shredding files. His nose worked the air, then he sat sharply, his alert signal. "What is it, boy?" Sarah asked, already pulling on evidence gloves. Behind the shredder, stuffed hastily between files, was a tablet. Its screen showed an email chain between Reynolds and Morrison, discussing not just drug shipments, but something called Project Echo, a program to replicate Max's enhanced abilities in other dogs. "Martinez," Sarah called, "we're going to need a bigger evidence box. And get me everything we have on William Morrison's current location." Max stood at attention, ready for their next move. Whatever Morrison was planning, whatever shadow agencies were involved, they would face it together. Just as they had 6 years ago in that dark laboratory where their partnership began. The night was far from over, but now they had what they needed: proof of the conspiracy, Reynolds in custody, and a lead on Morrison. Sarah checked her watch. 2 hours until dawn. "What do you say, partner?" she asked Max. "Ready to finish this?" Max's tail wagged once, decisively. In his eyes, Sarah saw the same determination that had kept him alive in Chen's lab all those years ago. They had survived that nightmare together. They would survive this one, too. The Atlanta harbor stretched before them like a dark mirror, shipping containers stacked in endless rows against the pre-dawn sky. Sarah studied the warehouse through her binoculars, watching workers load unmarked crates onto a cargo ship. Beside her, Max remained perfectly still, his eyes fixed on the same target. "Morrison's in there," Marcus said, reviewing thermal imaging on his tablet. "Security's heavy, at least 12 armed guards. They're moving fast like they know we're coming." Lieutenant Martinez adjusted his tactical vest. Reynolds talked. "Morrison's planning to move his entire operation offshore. That ship leaves in 40 minutes. Sarah lowered the binoculars, her mind racing through options. The warehouse was the same one they'd raided 6 years ago, where they'd first discovered Chen's operation, where Max had first proven his extraordinary abilities. "There's something else," Marcus added, his voice tight. "I decoded more of Project Echo's files. They're not just manufacturing drugs anymore. They're weaponizing the formula they used on Max. Sarah's blood ran cold. Weaponizing how? They're engineering a compound that can enhance or suppress a dog's detection abilities at will. Military applications. Marcus pulled up a chemical diagram. Think about it. An army of canines that can be switched on and off like radio signals. And Max's blood contains the key to making it stable. That's why they needed him alive, Martinez realized. Regular euthanasia would have destroyed the compounds in his system. Max pressed against Sarah's leg, a low whine escaping his throat. She knew that sound. He'd caught a scent. "What is it, boy?" she whispered. Max's nose worked the air. Then he turned sharply toward a section of containers near the water's edge. Sarah raised her binoculars again. There, partially hidden behind a stack of crates, was a familiar face from the security footage. Dr. William Morrison, speaking urgently into a satellite phone. "Target confirmed," Sarah reported. "But something's wrong. He looks nervous." Martinez keyed his radio. "All units, maintain position. Wait for—" A massive explosion rocked the harbor, sending a fireball into the night sky. Container stacks toppled like dominoes, and gunfire erupted from multiple positions. "They're destroying evidence," Marcus shouted over the chaos. "Morrison's cutting his losses." Sarah was already moving, Max at her heel. They'd trained for this environment countless times. The maze-like layout of containers, the limited visibility, the need to track multiple threats while maintaining cover. "Collins, wait!" Martinez called after her. "Backup's still 5 minutes out." But Sarah knew they didn't have 5 minutes. Morrison was escaping, and with him, the truth about Project Echo, about what they'd done to Max and countless other dogs. They weaved through the container maze, Max leading them on Morrison's scent trail. Despite the smoke and confusion, his tracking remained precise. Whatever they'd drugged him with during the certification test had fully worn off. Ahead, engines roared to life. A black SUV burst from behind a row of containers, Morrison visible in the passenger seat. Max reacted instantly, changing course to intercept. "Stop them!" Morrison's voice carried over the chaos. "Use the sonic device!" A high-pitched whine cut through the air, a sound too high for human ears, but Max stumbled, shaking his head in pain. Sarah recognized the technology, the same type of weaponized sound that had been used in Chen's original experiments. "Max, cover!" she commanded. He dove behind a container just as bullets sparked off the metal surface. Sarah returned fire, forcing the shooter to retreat. Her radio crackled. "Collins, they're heading for the private marina," Marcus reported. "I can track Morrison's phone, but—" Another explosion drowned out his words. Through the smoke, Sarah saw more SUVs converging on their position. They were being herded away from Morrison's escape route. Max suddenly barked, his alert signal. Sarah looked where he indicated and smiled. "Good boy." A crane loomed above them, its arm extending over the container rows. The control cabin was empty, key still in the ignition. The operator must have fled during the initial explosion. "Martinez," she radioed, "we need a distraction, something big." "Working on it," he replied. Moments later, emergency sirens blared from the harbor entrance. The SUVs blocking their path hesitated, then peeled away to intercept what they thought was incoming backup. Sarah and Max sprinted for the crane. Inside the cabin, she quickly familiarized herself with the controls. "This is going to be close, buddy." Max's tail wagged once, complete trust. The crane's arms swung out over the marina just as Morrison's SUV reached the private dock where a speedboat waited. Sarah watched through the cabin window, calculating angles, remembering her training. One shot at this. She grabbed the controls and sent a massive shipping container plummeting toward the dock. Morrison's driver saw it coming and slammed on the brakes, sending the SUV into a spin. The container crashed down, blocking their escape route. "All units, move in!" Martinez ordered over the radio. "Target is contained." Sarah and Max were already rappelling down from the crane cabin. They hit the ground running, closing in on the trapped SUV. Morrison emerged, clutching a metal briefcase, and ran for the water's edge. "Max, take him!" Sarah commanded. The Belgian Malinois launched forward with explosive speed. Morrison turned, raising something that looked like a remote control. The high-pitched whine filled the air again, but this time Max didn't falter. He'd adapted, just like he had in Chen's lab years ago. Morrison's eyes widened in disbelief seconds before Max hit him with perfect form, sending the briefcase flying. Sarah reached them just as Martinez's team swarmed in from all directions. "William Morrison," she announced, securing his hands behind his back, "you're under arrest for conspiracy, drug trafficking, and animal cruelty." "You don't understand," Morrison spat. "Project Echo could have revolutionized military operations. Think of the possibilities. An army of enhanced canines, perfectly controlled." "They're not machines," Sarah cut him off. "They're partners, loyal, brave, and a hell of a lot smarter than you." Max sat alertly beside her, his eyes never leaving Morrison. In the distance, more explosions lit up the warehouse as Morrison's team tried to destroy their operation. But it was too late. Martinez's people had already secured the main lab and its files. Sarah knelt beside Max, checking him for injuries. He responded by licking her face once, then turning back to guard Morrison. Always the professional. "Agent Collins!" Marcus jogged up, his laptop under his arm. "You need to see this." The files in Morrison's briefcase. It's not just about the drugs or Project Echo. There's a list of government officials involved, offshore accounts, military contracts. Sarah's radio crackled. "Collins, be advised." Martinez's voice was urgent. "We've got multiple hostile targets approaching from the north, heavily armed, not local." She looked at Max, saw the same determination in his eyes that had gotten them through every challenge since that first day in Chen's lab. "Ready for round two, partner." Max's ears perked forward. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The night was far from over, but they had Morrison in custody and proof of the conspiracy. Now they just had to survive long enough to make sure justice was served. Dawn was breaking over the harbor as Sarah checked her weapon and surveyed the approaching threat. Beside her, Max tensed for action, his temporary hearing issues forgotten in the heat of battle. They had overcome every obstacle Morrison and Reynolds had thrown at them. Time to finish what they started. The first rays of sunrise painted Atlanta's harbor in shades of gold and shadow as Sarah took cover behind a stack of containers, Max alert at her side. Through her tactical scope, she counted 6 black SUVs approaching from the north access road, their windows tinted, antenna arrays suggesting military-grade communications. "Federal plates," Marcus reported from his position, scanning through his laptop's connection to the harbor's security cameras. "But they're not in any official database." Lieutenant Martinez's voice crackled over the radio. "Collins, we've got Morrison secure, but his phone's been lighting up with encrypted calls to DC. Whatever's coming, it's big." Sarah watched another explosion bloom from the warehouse district. Morrison's people still destroying evidence. But they'd missed something crucial, something Max had detected moments ago. "Lieutenant," she keyed her radio, "remember Max's behavior during the certification test? How he kept alerting on the wrong containers?" "Yeah, we thought it was the hearing damage." "No," Sarah smiled grimly. "He was trying to tell us something. Marcus, check the shipping manifests for container number AT2749. Keys clicked as Marcus searched. Found it, logged as agricultural supplies, but wait, the weight distribution's all wrong for the listed contents. Because that's where they're hiding, the real Project Echo files, Sarah said. Max wasn't failing the test. He was warning us about what they were smuggling right under our noses. The approaching SUVs suddenly stopped, forming a defensive perimeter. Men in tactical gear emerged, their weapons and movements speaking of specialized military training. "Sarah," Marcus's voice was tight, "I just decoded more of Morrison's files. These aren't just government contractors. They're from something called the Advanced Canine Enhancement Division. ACED. Black budget operation, no oversight." "Let me guess," Sarah replied. "They're here to clean house and collect their asset." Morrison called out from where he sat handcuffed between two officers. "Did you really think a local police department could keep a specimen like Max? He belongs to ACD. Always has." Sarah felt Max press against her leg, his muscles tense but steady. She remembered finding him in that lab 6 years ago, remembering thinking his extraordinary abilities were just good breeding and training. Now she knew better. A figure emerged from the lead SUV, tall, distinguished, wearing a suit that cost more than Sarah made in a year. She recognized him from old photos. General Victor Hammond, the man who'd signed off on Dr. Chen's original research funding. "Agent Collins," Hammond's voice carried across the harbor with practiced authority. "I'm here to take custody of the K9 unit designated Echo 7 and all related research materials. I have executive orders authorizing this action." Sarah's hand tightened on her weapon. "His name is Max. Step away from the dog, Agent Collins. That's a direct order from the Department of Defense." Martinez moved to support Sarah's position, his tactical team spreading out. "This is an active crime scene, General. We have jurisdiction." "Not anymore." Hammond produced a folder of documents. "As of 5 minutes ago, this entire operation has been classified under national security protocols. Your investigation is terminated." Sarah looked at Max, saw the recognition in his eyes. He remembered Hammond too, remembered the general observing Chen's experiments from behind protective glass. "You knew," Sarah said, pieces falling into place. "You knew what they were doing to those puppies, what they did to Max." "We were creating the next generation of military working dogs," Hammond replied. "Enhanced detection abilities, superior tactical responses, perfect obedience. Echo 7 was our greatest success." "His name is Max," Sarah repeated, steel in her voice. "And he's not your property." Hammond sighed. "Agent Collins, I respect your bond with the animal, but this is bigger than you. Project Echo could revolutionize military operations worldwide. Think of the implications: drug interdiction, counter-terrorism, battlefield superiority." "By torturing puppies," Marcus called out. "I've seen the lab footage. What you did wasn't science. It was cruelty. Necessary sacrifices for the greater good." Hammond nodded to his men, who began advancing. "Now, hand over the dog and the research data. Don't make this difficult." Sarah felt Max's growl before she heard it, a low vibration against her leg. She remembered every mission, every late night at the kennel, every moment of trust between them. This wasn't just about one dog or one conspiracy. This was about right and wrong. "Martinez," she called out, "remember that joint operation manual you made us memorize? Article 17, paragraph 3? The lieutenant smiled. "Illegal orders do not constitute lawful authority, regardless of classification level." "Exactly." Sarah stood, Max at perfect attention beside her. "General Hammond, you're under arrest for conspiracy, animal cruelty, and illegal human-animal experimentation." Hammond laughed. "You can't arrest me, Agent Collins. I have immunity." "No," a new voice called out. "You don't." FBI Assistant Director Catherine Chen stepped out from behind a container, leading a team of federal agents. Sarah recognized her immediately, Dr. James Chen's sister. "6 years I've been building this case," Catherine said, approaching Hammond, "waiting for you to slip up. Now we have Morrison's files, Reynolds's confession, and dozens of witnesses." She produced a warrant. "Your classification authority has been suspended pending federal investigation." Hammond's face hardened. "Take them down. Secure the asset." His men raised their weapons, but Max was faster. He launched himself at the nearest operative, a black blur of precise aggression. Sarah and Martinez's team opened fire, forcing Hammond's people into cover. The harbor erupted into chaos. Sarah moved with Max through the firefight, their years of training showing in every synchronized movement. Behind them, FBI agents engaged Hammond's operators with professional precision. Through her tactical scope, Sarah saw Hammond running for his SUV. "Max, stop him!" The Belgian Malinois accelerated like a rocket, cutting off Hammond's escape. The general pulled a familiar device from his pocket, another sonic weapon, but Max didn't hesitate. He'd adapted to their technology, just as he'd adapted to everything else they'd done to him. Hammond managed one startled yell before Max took him down with textbook form. "General Victor Hammond," Catherine Chen announced, securing his hands with zip ties. "You're under arrest for the murder of my brother and the illegal continuation of Project Echo. You have the right to remain silent." Sarah knelt beside Max, checking him for injuries. He responded by licking her face once, then returning to his alert posture. Around them, Hammond's men were surrendering to the combined FBI and police forces. Marcus jogged up, his laptop displaying more decoded files. "Sarah, look at this." Hammond wasn't just continuing Chen's research, he was selling it to private military contractors, foreign governments, anyone who could pay. "And now?" Sarah asked, scratching Max behind his ears. Catherine Chen smiled. "Now we shut it all down. Every lab, every facility, every corrupt official involved. My brother tried to expose them and paid with his life. Today, we finish what he started." Martinez approached with Morrison in custody. "Container AT-2749 is secure. We've got enough evidence to put them away for decades." Sarah looked at Max, her partner, her protector, her friend. He wasn't a specimen, or an asset, or a weapon. He was a survivor who had chosen to use his enhanced abilities to help others. "What happens to the other dogs?" she asked. "The ones still in their program." "We found them," Catherine replied. 3 facilities, dozens of dogs. They'll need rehabilitation, training and new homes with people who understand their special needs. "I know some good handlers," Sarah said, watching the sunrise paint the harbor in hope's colors. Max barked once. Agreement, loyalty, partnership. Whatever came next, they would face it together, not as experiment and handler, but as what they had always been meant to be, partners. 3 months after the harbor showdown, Sarah Collins stood in the gallery of Atlanta's federal courthouse, Max sitting attentively by her side. Below, General Hammond and William Morrison sat with their attorneys as the jury foreman stood to deliver the verdict. In the matter of the United States versus Hammond and Morrison, on the count of conspiracy to conduct illegal animal experimentation, we find the defendants guilty. Sarah felt Max's tail thump against her leg. After weeks of testimony, including detailed evidence about Project Echo and its victims, justice was finally being served. On the count of obstruction of justice in the death of Dr. James Chen, we find the defendants guilty. Catherine Chen, sitting in the front row, closed her eyes briefly. Her brother's death had been ruled a suicide 6 years ago, but Morrison's files had revealed the truth. Chen had been killed after threatening to expose the project. On all remaining counts of corruption, trafficking of illegal substances, and animal cruelty, we find the defendants guilty. The judge's gavel echoed through the courtroom. Sentencing will be held in 2 weeks. Defendants are remanded to custody. As federal marshals led Hammond and Morrison away, the former general locked eyes with Sarah. "You have no idea what you've done," he spat. "The potential you've wasted. That dog could have changed warfare forever." Max didn't even growl. He simply watched, calm and dignified, as the men who had tortured him and countless other puppies were led away in chains. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed the steps. Marcus, now officially working as an FBI cybercrimes consultant, helped clear a path through the crowd. "Agent Collins," a reporter thrust a microphone forward. "What happens to the enhanced canines now that Project Echo is shut down?" Sarah stopped, considering her answer carefully. "They're dogs first, with extraordinary abilities second. Each one will be placed with specially trained handlers who understand their unique needs. They'll use their skills to help people, not hurt them." "And Max?" another reporter called out. "Will he continue serving with Atlanta PD?" Max sat proudly beside Sarah, his coat gleaming in the Georgia sun. The small scar behind his ear, a remnant of Chen's experiments, was barely visible now. "Max will continue doing what he does best," Sarah replied, "being a loyal partner and protecting his community." Catherine Chen approached, carrying a thick folder. "The rehabilitation program is ready to launch. We've identified 27 dogs from Project Echo facilities across the country. Each one has abilities similar to Max's. And Reynolds? Sarah asked. Accepted a plea deal, Marcus answered. He's providing evidence about other corrupt officials involved in the program. The investigation is spreading to police departments nationwide. Lieutenant Martinez joined them, his face serious. Speaking of investigations, the FBI's reviewing all cases involving Project Echo dogs. Some conviction reversals are coming. It turns out enhanced canines weren't admissible as probable cause. Good, Sarah said firmly. No more shortcuts. No more treating these dogs like machines. They walked together to the parking lot, where several transport vans waited. Inside each vehicle, rescued dogs from Project Echo watched curiously through the windows. They were headed to a new training facility, one designed for rehabilitation, not exploitation. The first handler class starts next week, Catherine said. We've selected officers with exemplary records and strong emotional intelligence. Each dog will be matched based on personality and ability level. Sarah remembered finding Max in that dark laboratory 6 years ago. He'd been terrified but resilient, his extraordinary abilities matched only by his capacity for love and loyalty. They'll need time, she advised. Trust has to be earned. Max's ears perked up suddenly. From one of the transport vans, a young Belgian Malinois began barking, not in alarm, but in recognition. Max approached the window, his tail wagging slightly. That's Echo 12, Catherine explained. She was in the same test group as Max. They must remember each other. Sarah watched as Max gently touched his nose to the window. The female dog calmed immediately, mirroring his relaxed posture. He's showing her it's safe, Martinez observed, that she can trust us. He's always been a good teacher, Sarah smiled. Maybe that's his next mission, helping these dogs adjust to their new lives. Marcus checked his tablet. The press conference starts in an hour. The Attorney General wants to formally announce the new Canine Rehabilitation Initiative. Sarah nodded. The world needed to know not just about the crimes of Project Echo, but about the healing that would follow, about turning weapons back into partners, experiments back into protectors. Ready for the cameras, buddy? She asked Max. He looked up at her with complete trust, the same trust he'd shown during their first case together, during the certification test chaos, during the harbor battle. He wasn't just a survivor of Project Echo anymore. He was proof that even the darkest experiments could lead to light. Later that evening, Sarah and Max sat on their back porch, watching the sunset. His head rested on her lap as she reviewed files on the newly rescued dogs. Each one had potential, not as a weapon, but as a partner to someone who would understand their worth. Her phone buzzed with a text from Catherine. First matching ceremony tomorrow. The handlers are ready. Thank you for showing us the way. Max's ears twitched at a distant sound, but there was no tension in his body. He was at peace, secure in his identity, not as Echo 7, but as Max, partner, protector, friend. Sarah scratched his favorite spot behind his ears, careful of the old scar. You know what, buddy? Sometimes the best justice isn't just putting the bad guys away, it's making sure something good comes from what they did wrong. Max's tail thumped in agreement. Tomorrow, they would help other dogs find what he had found. A purpose born of choice, not programming. A partnership built on trust, not control. The last light of day painted Atlanta's skyline in soft colors. In kennels across the city, Project Echo survivors were beginning their journeys toward new lives. And here, on a quiet porch, a handler and her extraordinary dog had already shown them the way home. Max lifted his head, looking at Sarah with eyes that held both wisdom and warmth. She didn't need enhanced abilities to understand what he was saying. They had done more than serve justice. They had transformed it into healing, and that was the greatest victory of all.